Hello, and thanks for slipping some time with me today. In this episode, let's tackle an interior dash components that are basically lifting off, separating from where they are. You've all seen it out there. It happens to basically older cars. It can be sun-baked, things crack up inside the foam and it's lifted. I'll show you on this car some prime examples of that. You've seen it for sure. It's a number of reasons why it happens basically, but it's just because it's old and brittle and baked and from sun, etc. And I'll show you a cheap way to fix it. You just got to take your time with it, so it does cost you time, but as far as money, it's actually pretty cheap to do. I've done it on previous cars, and you may say you have hints of that, but I don't think I've ever taken you through the process. So that's what I'm going to do on this car and show you that. Let's start with just showing you the damage that I see from the components lifting off the dash and how I'm going to approach that. So here's a prime example right here. It's a little dark in here, but you can see how this is lifting in here. That's all lifted, and it's just because the glue's let go of where the foam is behind it, as well as it swells and kind of flakes apart, and it just can't hold anymore. And this one will be a little tricky. I've even done these with the dash out or with the dash in. They're just a little tricky to, because of this round, how to get them back in and right. In fact, because the foam is swelled up so much, I've had to even remove foam and then tack it back in and to show you. Well, hopefully I don't need to do that on this one, but I'll kind of explain what I did there. So if we go to the other side, I have it out right now, but I basically took this, it's kind of a knee panel here that's in here, and it separates right in here. Show you a picture of that, and I've already started on it. Right now I've basically, you can see how it's separated under here, all in the edges here. Yeah, it's all not good. This was all separated. So here's what I use, by the way. I use 5-minute epoxy. It actually works really well, but you need to be careful with it. You need to keep it clean where you don't want it, and you need some type of clamping to do it all. And again, take your time. Lots of rags to clean things up while they're wet. Let's start with how this is going to look now that I did this corner, which is the worst corner. There's still some tricks I may need to do to get it perfect yet, but you get the idea of what I've done here. And I'll explain a little bit of details when I take this off. I'm curious how well it held after doing it here. I'm trying to do this with one hand, and just hang on. So you can see it's much better now. I'm not finished with it yet, and you can see how where I had this clamp, it kind of stuck on the epoxy. So now I can epoxy this a little better now without the clamp, because this is pretty firm in here now. It's pretty straightforward. I'll kind of dry fit it to make sure it fits okay first before I do any more epoxy work, but that's a good first start. And then we'll go on to the next thing. This I'll have to pick away off here, this little mark. There, I just used my fingernail to scrape that away, and let's just do a dry fit before we go any further on this. In case you're wondering what a dry fit is, it means before you go any further, just see if things are working out for you before you actually go for the gusto with the epoxy. So I'm holding it in right now, and you can see how now it's actually fairly lined up. So I'm very happy with that. You can still see how it's bulging out here because that's lifted, and we're going to fix that. The back side I'll do anyway, even though you don't see it, just to straighten it out. But this has really come a long way from what it was. This is what I'll use, this stuff. And then I'll just take some paper kind of for the mixing platform base. Just some ordinary paper. I fold it. And I'll use cotton swabs, but it's not how you think I use them. I don't use a swab mark. I will use I'll break it. Because if I need this little sharp edge, see how it makes a little sharp edge when you break it? It's really good if you need to get in somewhere. I mean, this is for a wider spot, but if you're trying to tuck in, it works really good that way. So, and then I'll just let's see here. Take this, mix it all up. If you haven't used epoxy before, then maybe practice on something else first. But it's pretty basic. It just mixes, you know, the two liquids here. So make sure it'll harden after the fact. One's a hardener basically. And I'm doing this just so it doesn't separate again. Some of that foam came off when I removed this clamp. And it doesn't have foam there anymore with any epoxy on it. So I'll just epoxy it so it can't lift anymore. Okay, now I want to fix this guy. Basically, I'm going to go put it inside here where it basically is going to go on the steel here. We're going to take this little guy again because it seems to work pretty good. This is a block of wood. This is basically a 2x4 with a sock on it. The socks on it is to protect the material that is on this actually cover panel. It just protects it, and the block of wood is to keep it straight, so when you clamp it, it keeps it all straight. So I'm going to put that in. By the way, this is for brake calipers, so it's got a reverse thread if you're wondering why I'm turning it the other way to clamp it. This should bring you in here and show you what it looks like. There, it's just clamped. You can see right in there. There's a little, but that won't be shown because it points down, and how that should epoxy in. Yeah, I noticed this is lifting now that I put this clamp in, so I got to reclamp it. There. That stayed stretched there. Okay. Hopefully that works. If not, I'll show you what to redo or how to redo it. But I think it'll work. I've done this a few times on this exact panel on other cars, and it ends up working out okay. So this one turned out now that we've let it sit overnight. You can see how much better that is. It's looking really good now. So I'll just keep going down the line. This one, I just did a little touch up here, and we're pretty good there. It's going to fit good. So the next item, we'll do a couple things here and there. Take you along with that. Obviously, you've got to do that too yet. All right. This is the way the panel is. And this is more what you see exposed. You'll see when I get it back in the car. This is never exposed, but I'm still going to fix this. But this is going to be the next, kind of working on the parts you see first, and then getting to these guys. So you can see kind of what I'm using for vices. And the reason I'm doing this is a couple of reasons. One is because I have other clamps being used right now. And just to show you, I'm kind of straightening out some these moldings here. And I've taken another video on how to do that. But so that one's used. You can see how I've got a brace here on clamping that, and then I've got a clamp over there, and just improvising in it. So that's why. So I don't want to slow myself down and wait for that to dry. And so what I've got here is basically ball joint tie rod remover thing, and this is for brake caliper spreading, but it works. And just showing you that you might want to improvise when you're doing stuff like this. If it works, sometimes it even is better than just the clamp that I showed you because of the way it fits. So the one thing I want to make sure of, as I showed you earlier, is I put a sock or this 2x4 to protect the coating or the covering here on it, as well as I'm going to use this little rubber mat piece for this guy, and you'll see how I'm doing that. So let's get to work here and get this front done up here. You can see how this is kind of, and don't mind this is covered up. That kind of fits in a slot, and this will all look really nice when we're all done on using that epoxy. Okay. This is going to go for this corner, and this is going to go back to the traditional way I was doing it. So let's get some, I already used that other one up, not just for this project, but for the other ones you've just seen. Don't be afraid to use what you need to. Still a cheap fix when you think about it, and it works. All right, missed, okay. Couple things to break these open. If you don't know how to do this, then again, this project is not for you. There's also a little bit of a thing in here you got to get rid of. I'll just get rid of it here. Put it out. And grab my trusty paper. And just so it doesn't bleed through, I fold it in half. And let's get some cotton swabs here. And I'll do my handy break. Makes a nice little point. And let's get to work. These are a little solidified starting out, so what I do with that is I'll just kind of stick this in and poke through here. And that usually takes it, rather than taking them back and trying to get a fresh batch, it's usually just right here that it kind of solidifies for whatever reason. Over time, if it's aged a bit, probably sitting on the rack at the store, nobody bought this last one or whatever. So, and once we get it going, there we go. There it comes, see? There we go. So because there's a lot of extra pressure on this one, it's going to run a little bit, and you want that 50-50 mixture. So because it's a little tough going, I'm just going to let it drain a bit here first. Put the lid back on. You know what? I might need a little more here. I'll start looking at how much I'm doing. I better do a little more. Okay, I think that's plenty now. Definitely plenty. The newer stuff I know has kind of a different color to mix in, and when the color disappears, you know it's mixed. So I know it's mixed when it's mixed here anyway. I can kind of see a little bit of a color change actually, and a consistency change. Okay, let's get this back in. Or in the glue spots we want to glue, or epoxy. All right. So if you notice now, I can poke it in, but because there's a bit of an edge on here, I can basically just put it in and wipe off the cotton swab shaft here, and it fits in. You can see how it's already starting to work pretty good there. I got, yeah, I got enough in there. So before I put the clamp on, I'm just going to squeeze it a bit and just, you know, that excess stuff here, just wipe it up a bit. So this is what I'm using for this one. Do that. And I got my little clamp here. Let me start clamping. To kind of curl over a bit, so let's do that. All right, and it's not too bad to even need to wipe up. So, and you can see it dripping a little bit there, which is fine. We'll just leave it like that. Don't want to get again, you don't want the covering on it full of epoxy, because if it's good epoxy, it'll be really hard to get out off it. All right, so let's do this one now. If you feel that this is starting to solidify too much, then you need to do some fresh stuff. It says 5-minute epoxy. I find you've got a little more than 5 minutes to do it, but not a lot more. And it kind of solidifies really quickly when it starts, and you see it starting to crystallize. Then your window of opportunity is over on this stuff. And when you compress it together, and then you separate it, you can see how it's kind of gooey in there, which means that it's holding, which is what you want. Let's clean this up a bit. I made a little bit of a mess again. And a little clamp going here. Clamp pad. And then here's my clamp. Okay, now we let this set. Now it's 5-minute epoxy. I usually give it 24 hours, just to be sure. And I find that works just fine. You can, if you're in a rush, you know, if you give it a few hours, you can maybe get away with it. Unless it's really got a lot of pressure that it wants to lift. With these don't, so we might be okay. I think I'm just gonna let this sit there and then I can do the other side after. So let's see how this held up. Looking good. Sealed up really good. That one's done. Let's try this one now. All right. Looks pretty good. That'll cover up nice. I think we got the important pieces done that are showing, which is on this edge, here in the front, and here. So let's do the less important stuff because it's kind of covered, but it needs to be done. Okay, there we have the clamps all in, and we'll see how this all turns out now. So then these cars, this is the big guy that always is troublesome and lifts, I would say 99.9% of the cars. If this has never been corrected, the age of them, this is separated to some degree, some pretty bad, some not so bad, but probably are lifting. I've taken the dash out before and repaired them, which is the proper way, but even then, it's really hard to get this perfect because of how curved it is in here and tucking that in. I'm going to do this in car. I've done this before, and I make a little jig to try and wrap around here and epoxy it and kind of fit it in there. You can see that it's separated pretty bad, and it's going to take some work. I took a few things off here, and why I did it is in the past, I still might do it, but I make a little bracket here, kind of joined up, and then it cinches in, kind of closes that up, and it works, but you got to be pretty precise in trying to get this wrap. I'm going to try something with my bracing technique. I'll show you in a bit here. Basically, I'm going to put a brace here and then to the door jamb here with something kind of like I've done with the moldings outside, and we'll see how that works. It might be an easier way of doing this. I haven't done it that way, but when I think about it, it might work well. So let's try that. The other thing that I'm going to do is, you see how that foam sticks out, and that makes it basically tries to shove back in there, but it also is hard to push it in. So I'm going to cut that off to be even. And I'm going to be using, here we go, an X-Acto knife, just because it does a much more precise cut. Just make sure you're steady that day in doing it, just to cut along in there. So to help this along, I've got this type of syringe-based 5-minute epoxy. that mixes as it goes, and then I can just inject it right in here and then seal it up. And that's very important, just because of I'm doing it inside, I'm not removing the dash, and I'm going to have to wipe up stuff, and I don't want to make a mess like you've seen other places where I've taken it out. I'd be able to wipe up pretty good, but here I just want to contain it a lot more, so it's a little more expensive for this one based on you get a smaller portion, but for this, addressing this problem, I think it's the best choice to try and do it. So you can see it's much better, very much better. It's not 100%. 100% would take a little more, well, actually a lot more time. Probably best to take the dash out, but it's pretty good. You don't see it unless you really look at it. So if you look at it, you can see in there a little bit of the foam in that. It's not that bad. But I'm also going to do a little trick because that foam is, I don't want to pick it out because then it leaves a gap. So, but it's because that's a yellowy foam, it shows up a little more. So I am going to tape this up, and then I am going to use some of this duplicable vinyl stuff, and it'll kind of hide that in. And normally, you know, if you want to do a perfect job like I did in the blue car, I took it all apart and redid it and never had to do any cover up like that. It was all fitting, but I'm not taking the dash out of this guy. It's just too much work, and this isn't going to be a full restoration perfect thing that I like to do all the time. But it's pretty darn good. So I just want to show you also what you can do that's a little easier to do than the craziness I did on the blue car, and get pretty good results. So I'm going to give this a little spray, and I'll show you the results after that. Let's see how it turned out. This has just been overnight now. Not that it was necessary to go a whole night, but why not? I had the time, so that's what we're doing. Okay. Okay. You can see basically it's all good again. We're all fixed up. Put this back now. Clean it up a little bit more, and then we'll put it back in and show you the finishing product. Finished product right there. All done. Much better. This one too. Not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was. We got it a lot better. This car is awesome shape. Well, I think that's going to wrap up this video. Now that we got this interior bit done, I thought I'd just share you how to do this, because this is a very common problem, as I mentioned, in older cars, you know, the 80s, 90s vintage, that you might want to know how to tackle these things. And you can make them pretty much new or very close to new. And a lot of you, I know, always are wondering how to tackle this stuff. So I hope you got something out of this. If you like this sort of thing, don't forget to subscribe. And until the next video, enjoy every day and always make it right.